hearing from the UN, the OECD, UNESCO, the European AI Office, and the US AI Safety Institute. So we'll get some takeaways from what the UN has been working on, with our first speaker, Carme Artigas, co-chair of the AI Advisory Board, Office of the UN Secretary General Envoys on Technology. Ms. Artigas, can you provide an overview? Where does the UN stand when it comes to accountability in AI? What is planned for 2025?
Yes, thank you very much. Dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, thank you very much for inviting me to this Athens Roundtable discussion and have the opportunity to share with you the outcomes of the work that the UN AI Advisory Body for the Secretary General has been working on for the last 11 months, starting in October 2023 and finishing on September 2024, providing recommendations on how to govern AI at a global level. So 1 year ago, or 15 months ago, nobody was talking about global AI governance. There were a lot of initiatives at the national level, even a regional level, the most advanced being the EU AI Act, but also the Executive Order of the United States, and several international conventions and agreements like the G7 Hiroshima Process, the GPI, the OECD, the UNESCO Ethical Guidelines. So in October 2023, the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, decided to gather a team of 39 experts representing 33 countries with a multi-diverse backgrounds, representing the academia and the industry, out of 1,800 candidates. And we were engaged to ask 3 questions. Do we need to regulate AI at the global level? Why? What exactly do we want to govern, and how? So along 9 months, we were working very hard. I mean, for the UN system, having 2 reports in 9 months, I tell you, that's very, very hard work. So we issued an interim report in December, asking the first 2 questions. Why do we need to govern AI globally? And what do we want to govern? And the last 6 months, we came up with some proposals that have become the first ever international blueprint proposal on global AI governance. To make it very, very short, even though we were realizing that there are a lot of initiatives within the UN system, like specialized agencies as UNESCO, ITU, or WIPO, and very relevant and important initiatives are the ones, for example, led by OECD, we identified there were 3 important global governance gaps. First of all, lack of inclusiveness. All these initiatives are very well intended, but only 7 countries in the world were party of all of them, and 118 countries of the world were party of none. The lack of inclusiveness involves lack of access to computing power. Out of 110 supercomputers in the world, there is no single one in the global south. Also, lack of inclusiveness included lack of inclusive data in the data set. All the AI we know has been trained with data from the global north. So that involves not only a technical problem, but a techno-social problem. Second important gap was lack of implementation gaps. There was a global deficit on implementation. Why? Because of lack of coordination of all these initiatives. This being a problem which is multilateral, which is international, that no single nation or company can solve. And that requires multilateralism. So we see a deficit in coordination even within the UN system with the different vertical subject matter expertise that is required in AI. And the third global deficit was in terms of accountability. In order to have accountability along the value chain on the AI, and it's different accountability from the developers, from the implementators, or the users, we need transparency. And because of the concentration of power of these technologies in very few hands, we don't have any means to ask for accountability. So based on these deficits, we were working on specific proposals. Those proposals were shared in the final report called Governing AI for Humanity, that was an integral part of the Global Digital Compact process, and that was successfully not only considered as a paper of the recommendation, but adopted as part of the commitments of the Digital Pact of the Future. It's important that the recommendations are not the result of 39 experts, are the results of a huge involvement. Many of those institutions are broadly represented here. So we really consulted more than 2,000 experts along these 11 months. We participated in more than 75 consultations. more than 250 written inputs were gathered from more than 150 organizations. And we also ran a risk pulse analysis and opportunity scan analysis with more than 350 experts. So really the recommendations are the result of the broad community. We also welcome the collaboration and agreement of the OECD and the pact that was signed during the UN week with the UN Tech Envoy office. And of course, anything that we propose was new, was also built on the success efforts of other international, because what we don't need is more conferences. What we don't need is more talking. What we need is synergies, convergence, and commitments. So what are these recommendations? Recommendation is, first of all, we need a common understanding, we need a common ground for action, and we need to ensure common benefits for all. The common understanding will come with the first proposal, which is an international scientific panel for AI, building on the success mechanism of the IPCC of the climate change, but adapted to the fast path of AI. We cannot expect a report every 6 years, but every 6 months. So that's what we are proposing. Second is, so the objective of this recommendation is an annual report, at least, of capabilities, opportunities, and risks, because there is no transparency on the risks, but there is not transparency either on the opportunities, which are huge. Second is a policy dialogue on AI. That is part of the common basics for action. And I think that is the right place, that there must be a multilateral agreement, sitting everybody in the table, intergovernmental institutions, private sector, academia, and civil society, to agree and share best practices on AI governments, to report significant AI incidents that exceed the capacity of state agencies to respond, and to promote common understanding for cross-border implementation of AI measures by private and public sector developers or users. So we think that these two instruments are very related. We need data, we need scientific evidence to inform policymakers on their decisions. And that information can be useful for the global governments, but also for national strategies. These are the two first measurements that are going to take place. There is already a process going, led by two co-facilitators, Costa Rica and Spain, that have already started working in engaging the members, the peer representatives in the UN, to start working on this field. And I hope they can report some progress during the France conference. We also propose other measures like the standard exchange that could be included also in the policy dialogue. And a third important set of measures that have to do to ensure inclusiveness, what we call common benefits for all. That is capacity development network. They need to engage the Global South in building what I would say the miracle triad. That miracle triad is data, talent, and compute. We need to allow for new innovation ecosystems to flourish at the local level, accessing to representative data, and creating local ecosystems for entrepreneurs in AI. And that should be funded with a global fund for AI, which we propose. It is funded by public-private philanthropic efforts, but also not only money, but in kind. And this global fund for AI should support the efforts for capacity building, but also the development of AI solutions for SDGs, which we consider AI can be very, very contributed. So this is up to date, the state of the art of this progress, and I hope this also can be the basis for more conversations, but above all for more commitments and more agreements. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Artigas. So we would like to hear now from our co-host today, the OECD, is Audrey Plonk, Deputy Director of the Directorate for Science, Technology and Innovation at the OECD. Would you like to provide us with what's coming up for 2025 at the OECD when it comes to AI governance and accountability? Thank you.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all here in the room. And for those of you online, thanks for joining us. It's really a pleasure to have partnered for many years now with the Athens Roundtable and to have you all here in Paris as we discuss these important topics. As the chair said, I'm the Deputy Director here in the Science, Technology and Innovation Directorate, responsible for our digital portfolio, including AI. There's a lot of things going on that we could talk about, but I wanted to focus my remarks today on two important initiatives that we have ongoing at the OECD that are focused on accountability. And the first is a reporting framework to help implement the G7 Hiroshima AI Process Code of Conduct, which was mentioned by the Deputy Secretary General. And I'll say a little bit more about that. And then the second is our work on responsible business conduct. And I'll give you some background on that work at the OECD, which dates back to the 1970s. So before I dive into the details there, just to say that our objective here is, in addition to putting an evidence base behind what's happening in AI, it's also to promote as much convergence and interoperability and policy frameworks as possible to the largest extent possible globally. And so the G7 Hiroshima AI process, as you know, produced several things, but namely a code of conduct that is focused on accountability for developers of what they call advanced AI systems. That code of conduct has 11 different actions in it. And so we've been we worked with Japan's presidency, so congratulations again to Japan to develop it at the time, and then with the Italian presidency this year to take the code and find a way to monitor its potential implementation by private actors. And so for the last 6 or 8 months, we've been working with the G7, also with a group of multi-stakeholder experts. And for those in the room who have helped us with that, I want to thank you for your time. I know it's a time-consuming process because it actually isn't that easy to take high-level principles and turn them into something that a developer of a system can implement. And so I'd like to say we actually have a meeting tomorrow. I'm very hopeful that we're close to being able to finalize that. It's taken the form of what looks like a survey. And we're very good at surveys here at the OECD. If you've worked with us before, you love our surveys. You all fill them out, right? In their entirety, very regularly. But it takes the form of a survey, and the survey ultimately would generate the equivalent of like a transparency report, which would at least in the discussions that are ongoing, we would make public. And part of the objective behind this is to provide information to the public about what companies are doing for research, for our own research at the OECD, but not only. And so we did a pilot of this reporting framework over the summer, and many organizations participated. We got a lot of feedback because it needs to be practical and something that can be used. So if you ask a lot of questions that people can't answer, if you ask a lot of questions that just give you really vague information, it's really not worth all our time and energy and effort. And so we've refined the framework based on all of that feedback we got, and we're in the final phases of hopefully coming to a final conclusion with the G7, which then we can operationalize in obviously in an online platform. And so that we're very excited about and hope to be able to say more very soon. And then the second thing that I think is really important here at the OECD is our the guidelines for multinational enterprises on responsible business conduct. This is something that dates back to the 1970s. It's an instrument at the OECD that actually has some enforcement capability through national contact points in countries that have adhered and more than 50 have, or countries that have joined and more than 50 have. And it takes a very comprehensive view of responsible business conduct in a variety of areas, from human rights to sustainability. And so for several years now, 3.5, we've been working with that part of the OECD. It sits in a different directorate than STI, or Science and Technology. We've been working with that part of the OECD to develop what we call implementation guidelines for due diligence around AI. So the idea here is to connect to existing instruments that are known by the private sector, that are known by actors around the world, and to embed AI and accountability and responsibility for AI development and deployment into those existing instruments, and to leverage, to some degree, what we already have, recognizing that, there are a lot of instruments happening out there, a lot of codes coming. And one of the things that we've done in the context of both the Hiroshima process And the responsible business guidelines is to map those different initiatives, looking at the AI Act, looking at what's happened in the UK, what's coming out of Canada, the NIST guidelines. There's a variety of instruments that we know companies are looking at, developers are looking at, deployers are looking at, to advance accountability. And so we've mapped all of those to both our guidelines, the responsible business conduct guidelines, but also to the Hiroshima process, with the objective of trying to make it as accessible as possible to entities that are developing and deploying AI. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you. So just to let you know, like we have had a first poll in the online audience, and so 77% of the audience is not like confident in our ability to govern AI collectively. So we're gonna have to do a lot of work to bring that number down to perhaps below 40%, hopefully, to make sure that like the online audience is convinced that like we can actually do something to govern AI. So let's bear that metric in mind, 77% at the start of the day. We'll see how it evolves throughout the day. Now, with that first step, like the next one with this new piece of information will be Cédric Wachholz, with the Chief of Digital Innovation and Transformation section at UNESCO. Could you tell us what UNESCO plans to do for 2025? Cédric.
Thank you so much, Nicolas, and the Future Society for organizing the 6th edition of the Athens Roundtable. We have been contributing to all the previous ones, and we are, of course, very happy to be here and contributing today too. Thanks to the OECD for hosting us. We were happy to be at GPI last week too with you. So we are privileged partners in our joint action. So I would like to speak about accountability and perhaps even go a little bit above with 5 minutes. It will be challenging, but to speak first about the ethics recommendation of UNESCO and how and which components are relating to accountability and how we're implementing that. And then secondly, how do we strengthen institutions to help govern AI. So on the first part, I think many of you are already familiar with the 2021 recommendation on the ethics of AI, which was developed in a multi-stakeholder fashion and adopted by 193 member states. It's quite a comprehensive document, but it has different elements and principles which link directly to accountability. One is the transparency, one is accountability itself, and one is human oversight. And of course, transparency, it is about understandable and traceable decisions throughout the AI life cycles. Accountability is about the AI actors' responsibilities for their system's impact and for eliminating biases, discriminatory outcomes, and other risks. And the oversight is that the humans remain in control to prevent harm and uphold human rights. Now, how do you, and we could go into much more detail, but it is also about the concrete action and how do we translate these principles and these recommendations into reality. And UNESCO has developed, therefore, a readiness assessment methodology, which is already applied in over 60 countries. And it provides a comprehensive evaluation of different dimensions in the AI ecosystem, including the legal one, but also the social, economic, and scientific. And it assesses the gaps in institutional and regulatory frameworks, and then really has tailored recommendations in every country for improvement. And this is also shared then through our UNESCO's AI Ethics Observatory. Now, there are also a number of actionable policy areas, and just to have a forward-looking dimension too, so you're all invited to come to our global forum on the ethics of AI in June in Bangkok to deep dive into this work. I would like to go really now into the second dimension in how AI requires I see the time limits, but I will briefly dive into some of our capacity development work. So we do capacity development for the judiciary, for civil servants and parliamentarians. And I will just speak now about the judiciary, where we developed a network of 35,000 judicial operators, so judges, prosecutors, lawyers, and we were able to train about 9,000 justice professionals in 140 countries. And there are different work streams for that. And one is a MOOC we developed with the Future Society and other partners already a few years ago. And already in the first month, there were about 4,000 or 5,000 judges and judicial operators who took that training. But we have also in-country training of judges. We have regional trainings, and we have a lot of different materials in this domain. Just to say, because of course, AI got a lot of attention through the generative AI, ChatGPT, and so applications. We did a survey within our network at the beginning of the year, which said that 44% of the respondents use ChatGPT and others for their work, but only 9% receive training or institutional guidelines on the use. And 92% said they wanted to have some mandatory regulations and trainings in this field. So we developed guidelines, which we consulted many of you on, and which are already part of, in several countries, being developed to be national guidelines in this field. And this is just an actual example of our work. Just to say also that we will be, of course, happily contributing to the AI Action Summit, but we have also global conference in AI and digital transformation in the public sector, where it is about accountability and the training and competencies of judicial operators, in addition to the Global Forum on Ethics AI, which I already mentioned. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So an important piece towards the rule of law has been the establishment as well of the European AI Office. Lucilla Sioli, you are here today, Director of the European AI Office at the European Commission. Thank you for being with us today. Could you tell us briefly what the European AI Office plans are for 2025?
Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot, Nicolas, for inviting us here. As you said, the European AI Office has just been set up. We were set up in June, and the objective of the European AI Office is actually to promote artificial intelligence for good, so what we call also trustworthy artificial intelligence. So on the one hand, we work on the management of innovation policies to make sure that we are capable to develop artificial intelligence in the European Union, and we ensure the adoption of AI by European enterprises. And on the other hand, we work on the implementation of the Artificial Intelligence Act. So the European Union is the first, let's say, continent to put in place a comprehensive framework and regulation for artificial intelligence, and in particular concerned with the risk that artificial intelligence may bring in terms of violation of fundamental rights and safety. And when we look ahead at 2025, we are, first of all, we have a very important milestone in terms of obligations that is for February, which is that the prohibitions of the Artificial Intelligence Act will be applicable. We have a very limited set of prohibitions in terms of the use of AI, for example, for social scoring or for the manipulation, the subliminal manipulation of the behavior of people. And so we have, it's a limited set of prohibitions, but they're very important. And we will be publishing guidelines around these prohibitions. And we will also be publishing guidelines about the definition of the AI Act of artificial intelligence, which is actually based, as it was said, on the OECD definition, but that we will detail further in February. And then secondly, a very important activity which is already ongoing and which will keep us occupied in the course of 2025 is the Code of Practice for General Purpose Artificial Intelligence Models. Here we are working with stakeholders. We have about 1,000 people from industry, from civil society organizations, from academics, who decided to participate into the Code of Practice. The Code of Practice is an instrument we use because the Artificial Intelligence Act includes some obligations for general purpose models, which will be applicable in August next year. And the code of practice aims at providing practical steps for complying with these obligations. So as I said, we have 1,000 participants right now in the code of practice, many international organizations present here, as well as other safety institutes are also observers in this work. And we will come forward before Christmas with the second draft of the code of practice. I say we, but in reality, the code of practice is managed and drafted by a number of independent experts. So the role of the European Commission under the AI office is very much about facilitating the process. After that, the European Commission will have to endorse this code of practice or not. And if we endorse it, then the companies can simply sign up to the code of practice to flag their compliance with the AI Act. And just to conclude, to say that the European office is also in charge of the promotion of the European approach to artificial intelligence. And so we engage in all the activities that have been mentioned, United Nations, OECD, GPI, network of safety institutes. We do have a unit in the AI office, which works as a safety institute, and that we are building up, and so we are strengthening our capacity in this field. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucia. And finally, before we kick off the conversations, we have another development of the past 12 months have been the creation of AI Safety Institutes. We have Elizabeth Kelly, who is the executive director of the US AI Safety Institute at NIST with us today. This is our last prepared remark. So to everyone around the room and around the roundtable, please prepare your questions, prepare your interventions, and we will get started after this. So Ms. Kelly, thank you for coming all the way. Please let us know what's the plan going ahead with the AI Safety Institute network. And yeah, bearing in mind that you are the last one before the conversation, so you might have a lot of questions back as well. Thank you very much. Oh, please activate your microphone as well.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a privilege to be here with this esteemed group. As you said, my name is Elizabeth Kelly, and I'm the director of the US AI Safety Institute, or AC as we call it, headquartered at NIST, which brings 125 plus year history of advancing scientific inquiry and standard setting for the latest technological innovations. I thought I'd spend just a few minutes talking about the work that we're doing at the US AI Safety Institute before talking about the AC network that was launched this last month. So at the US AI Safety Institute, our mission quite simply is to identify, measure, and mitigate the risk of advanced AI systems so that we can harness the enormous potential of this breakthrough technology. We are especially focused on helping prevent the misuse of the technology by those who would seek to undermine our public safety and national security. We've built up a terrific team of AI researchers paired with policy experts in different risk domains, located in both DC and San Francisco, so that we are close to the beating heart of innovation. We have three primary tracks of work. One is testing and evaluation. We've signed memorandums of understanding with OpenAI and Anthropic, and recently released the results of our first joint testing exercise alongside the UK AC of Anthropic's upgraded Sonnet 3.5 model. And we also announced that we completed testing of OpenAI's new O1 model, and you can expect results from that in the weeks ahead. We're really the central hub for the US government in terms of doing pre-deployment testing of advanced models to understand the risk they could pose, and are working with our partners across the US government through the new Testing Risks of AI for National Security, or TRAINS task force, to leverage the unique expertise that our partners, the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, National Institutes of Health, and others have into different risk domains, and both bring that to bear for the private sector, as well as inform our broader policymaking. We've also been issuing guidance on a range of topics, including mitigating the risk of misuse of dual-use foundation models, and best practices for identifying and authenticating synthetic content. The third pillar, and the most relevant for this audience, is the work that we are doing to really spur a global ecosystem of AI safety. We're doing that domestically through our partnership with the AI Safety Institute Consortium, which brings together more than 290 members drawn from civil society, academia, the frontier labs, as well as industry verticals like healthcare and financial services. It's wonderful to see some of our members here today. And we're grateful for their input and expertise on the work that we are doing in developing evaluations, issuing guidance, and much more. And of course, most importantly, we are thrilled to be part of the broader global ecosystem of AI safety. Everyone in this room knows that AI knows no borders, and we believe that the world benefits from a multiplicity of international initiatives, fora, and organizations, including the G7, OECD, ASEAN, NATO, and our newly launched network of ACs. Just a little bit of context on the AC network for folks who may not be familiar. We were announced in May at the Seoul Summit, and the goal is really to bring together countries that have launched AI safety institutes or similar bodies and have affirmed the Seoul Statement. Our current membership is Australia, Canada, EU, France, Japan, Kenya, Korea, Singapore, the US, and the UK. We view this network as enabling specialized expertise around testing and evaluation, frontier risks that we are able to bring to the broader conversation. We've really set it up to enable cooperation on research, best practices, and evaluation. And we think that we're already off to a very strong start with the convening that we had in November in San Francisco. At that convening, we focused the conversation around 3 priority areas that stand to urgently benefit from global collaboration, specifically managing risk from synthetic content, testing foundation models, and conducting risk assessments for AI systems. Each network member brought really their own perspective to the table, and we were fortunate to be joined by a number of external experts, again, from civil society, academia, as well as industry, who really informed our conversations. I think one of the things that we're most proud of is, despite our short history, the network is already sort of putting points on the board and proving the way that we can work together in a tangible technical way. We conducted the network's first ever joint testing exercise led by technical experts from the US AC, the UK AC, and Singapore AC. It was designed to explore methodological challenges and opportunities pulled by multilingual international testing to enable more robust and reproducible AI safety testing across languages and cultures. We also built on the commitments made in Bletchley and at Seoul and agreed upon sort of a shared scientific basis for risk assessments, building on building on things like making sure it's actionable, transparent, comprehensive, multi-stakeholder, iterative, and reproducible. And we announced more than 11 million in global research funding commitments to further the network's new research agenda on mitigating risks from synthetic content. Last but not least, all 10 members of the network agreed to a joint mission statement that memorializes our shared goals. And we as the US are privileged to be leading the network as chair over the course of the next year. Our goal with the network is really to bring together a lot of these technical experts across countries so that we are able to address some of the most pressing challenges in AI safety and avoid a patchwork of governance approaches that could hamper progress and innovation. Of course, a key part of that will be making sure that we are a resource to and informing the terrific efforts happening at GPAY, the UN, the OECD, and we are moving towards Paris, preparing additional deliverables and sort of concrete actions that we can bring to the conversation there. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's exciting to be here with all of you and look forward to continuing the conversation and the work, both in the lead up to Paris and beyond.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we will now open the discussion. Just one data point, the figure of 77% has now gone up to 81%. So that means that But like there are specification, like the online audience is letting us know that it's not about the confidence in the people in the room, it's about the scale of the challenge that they are realizing, that it's a tremendous challenge. So our goal will be to bring that figure down to maybe below 50%, to make sure that like we have at least 50% confidence in the governance of AI for accountability. I see we have a few people who want to intervene already. I will go. Sebastian, perhaps you go ahead.
Thank you very much for organizing this event. And I very fondly think back to the very first AI Roundtable that I attended in 2019. And it's good to see many of the same faces here again. I'm the chair of the European Committee that creates standards for the AI Act. I'm also the program chair of the Digital Trust Convention, which we held for the very first time here at the OECD last month. And we've heard a lot echoing Nicolas' initial remarks about having the power and the authority in the room to shape the future. And I would very much underline that. And we've also heard a lot about the big toolbox in the sense of structures that are emerging at regional and international levels, about methodologies, about frameworks, about conventions. This big toolbox that I would label AI governance toolbox is crucial and continues to be crucial. But I would argue that we need a second toolbox next to the AI governance toolbox, because the AI governance toolbox is not going to reach very well bad actors. And a lot of the downsides and the problems and the challenges that we have in AI are caused by the misuse of AI through bad actors. To some extent, it's also the consequence of open source AI, which is broadly a good thing. Both will stay with us. And therefore, I would encourage us to think about the second toolbox that is much more around how do we make the digital space resilient? How do we need to upgrade the digital space so that it survives the presence of a flood of AI-generated fakes and bots? How can we build the infrastructures and the protocols that make up such an upgraded digital space? And we've done it before. We upgraded the digital space in a major way 15 years ago when we introduced SSL as a standard. And you might remember that websites all of a sudden didn't have HTTP. They now had HTTPS. And there was a whole shift in terms of certificate authorities, in terms of protocols that was happening. And we need a similar upgrade now. And as a final point, this will also take some of the pressure away from thinking, how on earth can we govern and regulate the innovation into the unknown that is happening at the big foundation model development organizations, where we always have that tension between how do we explore the unknown in a beneficial way and how do we govern the risks. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd make sure that we keep our focused piece, and because we are already quite a few people in the room, notably over there in that corner. Robin, if you'd like to bring the mic for afterwards, but please float it.
Thank you very much, esteemed colleagues. This is Fotis Vitsalis from the Hellenic Parliament. If it is one thing I would like to mention right away is that we are mentioning accountability as a major notion of bringing AI to society and for society to benefit. But at the same time, we need to consider accountable to whom. Now, governance institutions are accountable to Parliament. So in that sense, parliaments need to be part of the very complex equation. And as a brief remark, I'm very honored to be here, and thanks to your invitation and the kind support by Ambassador Pagoulatos from the Greek embassy to the OECD. And I'm seeing a colleague, I think, back there from Croatia, from the Parliament. That's too few. There have to be, maybe you consider this in a next iteration of this roundtable, to bringing parliamentary expertise for a few reasons that I would like to highlight. For instance, parliaments are rarely part of the equation, also because they are traditionally very conservative. So they need support. And often support comes from governance institutions, from the government itself. But at the same time, they need to preserve their digital sovereignty. For artificial intelligence, this is a very difficult task because this might be that their systems need to be under the government cloud, for instance. We are developing with my team systems that might be able to be on-prem. So this is a direct question to the European Commission and maybe NIST and perhaps Anthropic and Mistral. Is this even possible to be solved? Is it even possible to have these kind of smaller SLMs, small language systems, specifically targeted to solve parliamentary problems and use cases? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see Mistral, Audrey, you want to take this question straight away and make your remarks? Go for it. We'll get.
Thank you very much. I'm representing Mistral, which is frontier AI model developers headquartered in Europe. I hope this is possible. I hope that indeed, I think I'll rephrase the question differently. I would say that this technology is transformative enough to have a strong impact on the competitivity of where it is deployed. And I think there's a huge responsibility of every stakeholders to choose carefully the kind of company and the solutions they're working with, because it has a strong competitivity impact. And indeed, we have been, since the very beginning, we have been investing in offering control to our customers, and that's why we decided to deploy on-premise for our customers. So we hope that we can provide our customers with the level of technology and performance that they need, but also the level of privacy and security that goes with sensitive and regulated industry. I had two very brief comments about what was said previously. The first one, I strongly believe that we can't hold for accountable things that we don't properly understand. And I think we may be the lucky one in this room understanding properly or kind of properly this technology. I think it's absolutely not the case outside of this room. And if we want at some point for public opinion to hold these companies and this technology for accountable, we need to work hard on first agreeing all together about a common taxonomy, about a common way of talking about it and knowing what we talk about and what this technology is capable. And when we say that, I think there's a huge work to be done to reduce the fragmentation of what we talk about, the fragmentation of the regulation around the world. The second part goes also with AI literacy. During years, we worked a lot, everybody worked a lot, OECD, UNESCO worked a lot on digital literacy for social media. Now it's time to move on to the next level and to also work on AI literacy to make sure that the people using this technology know what they are doing with it, know what they can expect from it, and also are able to hold companies accountable. The second part, I wanted to react on the comment made on open source and the impact of open source on misuse. Indeed, there could be misuse facilitated by open source, but we have seen in the past misuse also be done when it was closed system, and we've seen that in the last 10 years, 15 years of tech history. I don't think open source is creating additional misuse. I think it's increasing transparency and indeed accountability, and we've seen that in the development of cybersecurity software for many years. I think the question is more about the centralization of this technology in an industry that now has a very, very few number of. If we want to hold people accountable, we need to reinforce this centralization.
Thank you. So I guess in terms of the common understanding, like I think we don't have to understand like how airplanes work or the nuclear industry works for us to be able to require a very limited number of accidents per thousands of years or per hundreds of thousands of miles. So we can set some KPIs probably for still together today. Cameron, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicolas. Some of you know the Forum for Cooperation on AI, a joint project that I lead at the Brookings Institution with the Center for European Policy Studies, track 1.5 discussions with the United States, EU, UK, Canada, Japan, Australia, and Singapore. And I believe very much in the importance of cooperation, of like-minded and other countries working together. But Nicolas, you talked about the scale of the issue that we deal with here. And in addition to the scale, we have extraordinary complexity. We've heard about the uncertainties and diversity in a very diverse landscape. This does not lend itself to a perfect Cartesian organization. And then we have to recognize that some of this complexity, some of the diversity, the different centers of energy are a feature, not a bug in dealing with these issues. Visualize, if you will, the map of the internet backbone around the world. Hubs linked by cables that span the world, but with different clusters, different scales. A huge cluster in Europe, a disproportionately small one in Africa, each continent different. I view that as both a metaphor and a representation of the state of AI development and the state of AI governance. A representation in the sense that those networks, those hubs, are what the cloud, the compute, the data ride on. And that shapes the landscape of AI. It also shapes the architecture of AI governance. It's why you have the OECD and the G7 and having taken initiatives that have moved things further along. The OECD ethics work is a central pillar of global governance. It is also a metaphor in the sense that those networks, those hubs, do not have any centralized governing system. In fact, it is loosely governed by an aggregation of organizations, most in the nature of standards development organizations. And in addition, networks have as features diversity, redundancy, and resiliency. And those, the redundancy, the diversity are what provide the resiliency. They create, a protection against failure at any one node. And I think, that kind of diversity, those networks are, can help to advance AI governance in a much more diverse way and crowdsource the solutions.
Thank you for that. Yeah, indeed, the importance of diversity. We will have a question from the Roundtable, but before that, a piece of good news. 72% of our audience think that the European AI Act will be somewhat or very effective at keeping general purpose AI developers accountable. So this is already a good milestone, I guess, for the community that works on the governance of AI. Congratulations on that. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Nicolas. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to attend today. My name is Leander Barrington-Leach. I'm the Executive Director of the Five Rights Foundation. We're an international NGO working to ensure the digital world caters to children. I am very glad to be able to speak early in the day to put children on the agenda. Children are 1/3 of users. They have very specific rights, additional rights. They are early adopters of technology. Obviously, they have the longest lifespan, so it impacts them for the longest. And as I say, they have very specific rights, and they have no political capital, and we have a duty of care to represent this whole third of humanity when we're talking about AI. So the Five Rights Foundation, we have been working with a number of stakeholders also in the room today to develop pioneering research and also regulatory and technical frameworks for AI governance for children, including working indeed on the AI Act with the Council of Europe on the Convention, and on technical standards, including with CENCENELAC and IEEE, as well as with the UN Advisory Board on the framework governing AI for humanity. We've spent the last year or so working with a huge range of partners from around the world, technical and rights experts, and many partners in this room on an AI code for children, specifically providing a practical framework for AI innovation and oversight that takes into account the risks and needs to children. And as I say, I'm grateful now quite early in the day to have the floor to ask you to please engage and to prioritize children in the discussion regarding AI today and also at the upcoming Paris Action Summit. Thank you, Nicolas.
Thank you so much. So yes, some progress, yes, thanks to Five Rights on AI governance for when it comes to children in particular. I know Raja, I believe, you wanted to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Raja Shatila, professor at Sorbonne University and involved in several activities on AI ethics, safety, policy, standards, and environmental impact. My point that I would like to raise is related to the issue of benchmarking. We need to have a correct evaluation of those systems to rely on a shared set of reliable benchmarks that are able to evolve and be completed as the technology evolves, actually. And I believe this is an important issue in global governance, because if we approve globally this set of benchmarks and the approach to test the AI systems, then we will have a leverage on controlling the whole ecosystem of the development of AI. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that Sebastiano, you wanted to react earlier. Please go ahead, introduce yourself briefly in case people haven't seen it.
Thank you, Nicolas. Sebastiano Tofaletti, representing the European Digital SME Alliance. I hope you can hear me. An association of 45,000 IT companies, only SMEs and startups in the network all over Europe. I wanted to echo what I heard from the colleague of Mistral about the open source issue. The open source issue in AI is not the source of the problems. I believe that is a very perhaps oversimplistic way of describing things. I do not think, I disagree with Sebastian, I do not think that minimizing the risks of AI will be as simple as adding an S to HTML in the protocol. It's not going to be that. And the reason is simple. She said, because, and others said, we have a big problem of market concentration. And over the internet, in the nature of it, it is not the case, because the internet is an open and free ecosystem where everybody has the right to create their own website. Here, the technology needs to get into more transparency and accountability. And it is precisely by opening it up, making sure we have a more democratic market that we would ideally reduce the risks. And we have, as you said, we have very good experiences in cybersecurity, where in fact the open source systems are not less secure than others, simply because the systems develop themselves into addressing in real time the risks that arise. I think this is a very important conversation, and this is probably one of the most open and more important issues that are still to be discussed. And I really encourage also the institutions to work into definitions of what is meant by open source AI, because of course there are attempts by industry players. I don't want to name anyone, but they know whom I'm talking about. They are trying to describe themselves as open source, but people who are really open source, they say, no, this is not open source. This is just a facade of open source. So this is really something I encourage the institutions at the international level to look at, because this is a fundamental issue for us and for our community.
Thank you. Yeah, so navigating the open source issue is probably important. I think let's go with Carme first, but then I would want to hear Jack Clark from Anthropic reply to then after that.
No, I just wanted to intervene, seeing the low level of encouragement on the audience. I would like to campaign a little bit in favor of governance, because what I realized that people usually confuse three terms. People confuse ethics with governance and with regulation. If I say, is everybody in favor of ethics? Everybody will say yes. And ethics means how do we ensure that developers, users, implementers are behaving ethically. But ethically, which is very well documented in guidelines, we have counted more than 70 different guidelines, either coming from international institutions or private companies. This is nice to have, but there is no accountability and there is no rights derived from ethics. It's subjective, it can change on the CEO, and that's a good thing to have, but not necessarily generates values, it generates accountability. So the importance is not ethics alone. The importance is governance. Governance means what are the instruments we must put in place to ensure that companies and governments are behaving ethically. And that generates accountability, and that generates rights. And legislation is one instrument that can lead to governance, but not the only one. We can use market incentives, we can use transparency tools, we can use scientific panels or monitoring, or in this particular case, emergency response mechanisms. And that's what we need to work together in finding these instruments, which are common sense instruments that not hamper innovation, but generate rights and accountability. So please think about these three differentiations and vote again.
Thank you. Yeah, let's go with Jack. I also want to emphasize, like, it's for the Roundtable, like, feel free to raise your hand. We are arriving in the last 15 minutes of this session. So I just want to make sure that we also from the Roundtable. But yeah, Jack Clark, let's go ahead. Yeah.
Hello, so I'm Jack with Anthropic, and I wanted to participate in the rich discussion on open source and open weight models. But I should preface this with Anthropic is not an impartial actor here. We make proprietary models. And for that reason, I think Sebastian's comment was very important, which is there needs to be an impartial third party that looks at the potential risks or misuses of AI systems, whether proprietary or open, or this discussion will be incredibly unproductive and heated forever, and we'll never solve anything. But I also feel like I should state just very clearly that there are direct attributable harms today to open weight models. The early image generators were immediately used for large-scale child sexualization because people removed the safeguards that have been placed on them, which is something that can only happen with these open weight models. I am not the person to make the case about that. I work for a proprietary company, but we desperately in the governance conversation need to build an institution that can make that case and represent that risk so that we can have a mature discussion about this. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Paul.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm from DG Justice in the European Commission. And I just would like to make a comment which relates to the title of our meeting, namely the rule of law. the key question when it comes to policing power, including technological power, is of course what happens if the big players don't play ball, if an individual feels they're not complying with the rules, or if an individual or civil society feels the authority called upon to enforce the rules, the governance, is not doing it because they are captured. And we all know what it means, the word administrative capture. And I think these are the crucial questions which we have to answer. We must develop together on national levels, but also on the level of the UN systems. And I think it is inevitable that these must be systems of law which ensure that individuals can avail themselves of their rights, that they can call upon a judge if ChatGPT or Anthropic or whoever it may be builds a system which doesn't comply with the technological rules, with the safety prescriptions which have been developed. And the same, we need to make sure that individuals can bring a case against the enforcers of these rules. And this is something we know it from competition law, we know it from European privacy and data protection law. And this is the type of debate which I would suggest to all of you, we must now bring into this space of this very early, and I would say still very naive discussion on, well, you know, let's be nice, let's have governance, let's have a scientific panel. I mean, this is all fine, let's have it. But in the end, the hardcore question in this field, dominated by the issue of power, is to bring in the traditional methods of how the law deals with power, and in this way ensures that individuals get their rights. And that means we need rights of action in law for civil society, we need rights of action for individuals, both against the companies and against the enforcers, so that the system of power is rebalanced again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. We have a first question from the roundtable, Asma, I believe. Like, if, or Mike Runner, Robin, if you can go there. Please, as you are in the roundtable, like raise your hand very high so that and keep your hand high so that the mic runners can identify you more easily. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Hi, my name is Asma. I'm the founder of Ethical AI Alliance. We are a very young grassroots movement, transdisciplinary, global, trying to decenter AI and bring in some uncomfortable conversations. Speaking of which, I feel like I am among the 81% for the reason of that the conversation around governance are not enough stressing the urgency of the topic. I think we should be talking about AI as if our lives depend on it, because some lives are actually dependent on it. As we speak, some people's lives are being, decided by algorithm in credit scoring or healthcare or in warfare. So my point here is, I think we should get into, it's important to discuss taxonomy and frameworks, but I think what a lot of us want there, just people, a normal human being, is whether it's ethics, governance, regulation, is to feel that we understand the risk and we are here to prevent them. And so a couple of ideas around that is third-party audits, algorithm transparency mandates, inclusive AI governance by design, not just, I know we're here in Paris at the OECD, but there's a lot of very interesting things happening around the globe, and I think we should foster more this kind of conversation. There are some ethical frameworks developed in other regions of the world, taking into consideration different cultures. So I guess these are the kind of conversation that we should bring more into the table, and we're here for it. So feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Gaia Marcus. We have also Noza Bujema and two gentlemen in the back. We have the Kai in the roundtable. This.
Thank you. Guy Marcus, Director at the Ada Lovelace Institute. I just wanted to speak in support of both Paul and Asma's points. Firstly, I think we have maybe not heard that much yet from civil society. So just a reminder that your publics have very nuanced expectations of the governance of AI. In-depth research with representative samples of the public in the UK shows that they have the most interest of use of AI that is in the public interest. And even in those cases, they expect there to be redress, they expect transparency, they expect explainability. So as we move to the Paris AI Action Summit, this is not a naive audience. There are big expectations of the summit with a media and a public that have far higher expectations of us than they did with the first summit in Bletchley. And I would just agree that we really need to be thinking about power. This boils down to incentives. Voluntary commitments are no longer defensible, I would say. There are too many other incentives on privately based companies to just expect them to respond to voluntary commitments. We need to move to international consensus and alignment, especially on foundational models. But as Paul has said, this then has to be replicated at a national level by legislation. And so just say really interested in discussion, really interested in contributing further, but I thought I'd give just a bit of support to Paul and Asma.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I would like here to highlight, in fact, indeed, when we talk about AI and rule of law, so AI, it's a technology, it's a science and technology, law, you know, it's a different kind of thing. I would like to stress the importance of the interdisciplinary approach when we deal with this topic. It should not be only law and it should not be only tech. This is so important to deal in this, you know, interdisciplinary, not only way of thinking, but the way of making the governance happen. I mean, what I would like to highlight also, and I agree about the difference between ethical AI and responsible AI, there is a huge difference. I mean, ethics is, of course, as what have been said, it's subjective, it's cultural dependent, etc., etc. But I would like us as a collective, you know, community to move from declarative compliance to measurable compliance. In fact, I know that we cannot measure everything, okay, but it is so, I mean, data sets and benchmark have been mentioned earlier, but also I really would like the community to make happen, in fact, tools and metrics. If we cannot identify, if we cannot measure, if we cannot assess a given risk, we cannot mitigate it. We cannot govern. We can say, yes, in fact, nothing to do, everything is okay, go. This is declarative compliance, okay? So what I would like us, in fact, to move in this governance, you know, aspect is to really be careful about not setting up a declarative governance, a declarative compliance, and that's it. Meaning, okay, we have done it, yes, but how far it mitigate and avoid risks to people, to company, and to the planet. So that's why, in fact, I really would like to, in fact, stress the fact that also agreeing and developing, in fact, metrics, technical metrics about the behavior of algorithm, about the traceability, life cycle of data, cross foundational model. I mean, in fact, here when I'm talking about AI or Gen AI or whatever, and I really would like also to extend it to all, you know, digital services, because when you build an AI solution, you will not make a difference between, oh, this is AI, this is Gen AI, this is the, I mean, it's a digital solution that you provide to your customer, and it's important to be responsible and accountable. How you can prove the accountability. That's why I'm talking about measurability, because trust, you know, it's okay, but proof of trust is even better. And we should work on the proof of trust.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. If Robert Traeger, then the gentleman just
Thank you, Nicholas. I just wanted to say a word about the sort of future thinking that I think we should be engaging in now. We don't want to later on be in a position where we say that we wish we had a certain technology, but we could have developed it, but but we haven't. And I think there are many technologies that we need to develop for a governance purpose that open up the range of governance options. These include verification technologies as a primary point of investment, but not only those technologies. And I think, and I'll be very brief, I think that we need to be thinking about the sort of ecosystem that we have in other industries and all of the different aspects of those ecosystems that facilitate them. In some cases, the word resilience was mentioned. So we need to be thinking about what makes an ecosystem resilient. And often it's a whole set of institutions, some of which have a technical mandate, some of which have a political mandate. In many cases, the institutions that actually provide information so that there's common knowledge on what actors are doing around the world, which then allows a different set of actors to take action based on that common knowledge. That's what we have in a range of other industries that actually has proven very effective in industries like, for instance, civil aviation, where we've had this increasing standard of safety that has gotten, that we all enjoy around the world, and which has gotten quite, let's say, extreme in the sense of its safety. So I think, right now, many around this room are engaged in initiatives that are doing some of this. For instance, engaged in thinking about what is required technically, and many are thinking about model evaluations. But there is a whole range of technical governance investments that I think we need to make so that later on, when we decide we really need an...
Sorry, we really have just a few seconds to finish. All right, thank you so much, Robert. David Satola, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the Athens Roundtable and OECD for having this meeting and inviting us. I wanted to echo a few of the comments made previously by Karma and Paul and others about the kind of range of normative standards that we have here that we're talking about in governance. So we've got some ethical principles that cover some things. We have some legal frameworks now in the EU AI Act that approach things from a legal perspective. We have the Council of Europe Convention, which approaches things from a very human rights perspective. And if you look at them all together, there's a lot of commonality in the things that are covered, but there are some gaps depending on whether it's principles or law or human rights. And I think that we need to recognize that there's kind of an arms race of governance proposals out there that are kind of impeding getting to the point of a common approach to governance. We do, as others have said, lack a common taxonomy here. Standards are still developing, but I think, as Robert just said, we can look to other industries and other experiences of technology and law as to how that governance has taken place. I think immediately of the Internet Governance Forum and the management of Internet governance that emerged in the late 90s, early 2000s to fix a very specific problem of who is going to control the Internet. There you have academia, you have technology, you have the private sector, governments, international organizations, and I hope that we can achieve the same sort of synthesis, multi-stakeholder synthesis and inclusion here that we've seen in other places. And I think it's important that, why is multi-stakeholderism important? It's important because those who are affected should be participating in the development of the rules that will govern them. And I think that we risk, if we go too far in a state-centric approach, we risk excluding those who are developing the technology, using the technology. If we go a different way, where we only follow the framework of those who have control of the infrastructure involved in the development of the rules, then we potentially run the risk of excluding those in the global majority. So I think there's a lot that we need to take account of here in developing, thinking about governance, but we can perhaps learn from some of the lessons that we've had. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really re-emphasizing like to keep the remarks brief as possible. We are already over time, so we are eating into the time of the next conversation. Dekai, please, like if you have in 20 seconds or 30 seconds, your key points to make.
Hi,
Thank you.
Dekai. I'm AI professor, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and Berkeley's International Computer Science Institute. I've been struck by how few of my colleagues here have been working in deep AI for 40 years. Stuart, my colleague here, is maybe the only person I'm seeing in the room. And this is really worrying me. There are a lot of things that I'm hearing that come from the unconscious cognitive bias, which is an area that I work on in AI ethics, of what's called the representativeness heuristic. And this is where you make predictions based on shallow, superficial similarities of what you're observing today, based on what you remember in the past. I think it is really critical when we talk about AI and what it can do and how to restrict it, especially with respect to foundation models, to stop making the mistake of thinking that AI is the flavor of the month, LLMs, and when we talk about open source. I keep hearing this mistake.
Thank you.
What we don't realize is that many of the strategies we're talking about are going to backfire, because true AI is not large models. True AI is small data, is small resources. And as we think about governance, I don't hear enough conversation about culture, because when next year, 2 years from now, anybody can build small AIs with the kind of power that we now expect from LLMs, that is not something that we're going to be able to govern in the approaches that I'm hearing today in the room. And I would encourage us all to consult more with those of us who are actually in AI to discuss what AI is going to be 1 and 2 years from now, and understand that the only way to get on top of this problem before it's too late is to think about culture and culture change, and not only governance based on an assumption that culture stays static.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dekai. Ben?
No worries, and thanks for holding this roundtable. I'm going to be super quick despite wanting to address 3 specific points. The first one is a bit of a plus one on what Paul said earlier about not forgetting that we actually have legislative capacities and tools. Although I would not restrict it to remedy, I think that's really important, but in the context of AI, really extraordinarily hard for individual citizens to exercise their rights. So I think ex-ante approaches are actually quite crucial. The second piece is I do want to kind of raise the point that I profoundly disagree with the statement that we can't be held accountable for a technology we don't understand. I actually think it's something I hear.
Exactly what I said.
It's something I hear all the time. I actually don't. I think all the labs in some way, shape, or form are formulating this argument. I just don't think it's true. There's been many industries where actually the burden of responsibility, the burden of verifying and certifying is on the state, but the burden of not putting something on the market that might be harmful actually lies with the company and the product. And the third piece would be to get hopefully soon to the next level on the open closed conversation, which really is not the conversation. The majority of people want the vast majority of models to be open. But if we start talking about model sharing modalities, then we can kind of look a little bit more granular. What are we willing to put out? What can't we put out? And where is there a like specific safety question, which is very rarely the case, which means that there's a lot of space for open sourcing. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicolas. I'll also be very brief. I just want to me on what you shared in terms of approaches and differences between ethics and governance and regulation, to just share from our perspective what we see as kind of 3 key ways of cooperating going forward to make AI governance effective. And you evoked in the beginning this necessity for multi-stakeholder and international cooperation, and we see that as really as the 2 key pillars to make sure that those that are developing the technology are around the table, to make sure that we can translate risks into actual technically feasible requirements. And I'll just say that I think there are 3 key takeaways that I take from this conversation. One is trying to figure out what we're regulating, so making sure that we have a shared vocabulary. I don't think that exists to date, despite the great work of the OECD, including on the definition of an AI system that is a live discussion at the level of the EU, but also what open source might or might not mean, which is clear from this conversation. So making sure that we have that shared vocabulary and international alignment. We see see as very important. I think the second piece, and Raja, I'd like to just double click on what you said. I think it was great. We need to be thinking about how we are regulating. Elizabeth Rob Reich from NIST recently at the Paris Peace Forum said that we're under indexing and under investing in the development of metrology. And I can say, and I am sure a lot of the companies around this table share my concern, there's a lot of conversations around safety evaluations and safety testings. And one of the things that we're constantly saying is, okay, but against what? And so developing the metrology for this kind of safety testing, we see as absolutely essential to provide the regulatory clarity, to innovate responsibly, but also in a safe way. And then lastly, why are we regulating? I think one of the biggest things that I hear from the startups that we're working with is that there are different approaches to risk. And so an interoperable approach to risk that builds on alignment through conversations like the OECD and the G7, we see as absolutely essential so that we have a shared understanding of risk and work backwards from there to develop technically feasible obligations for developers and deployers.
Thank you so much, Sasha. And I know that a few of you in this roundtable have now warmed up and want to contribute. We are calling this session to an end, and we're going to actually start talking with my colleague Nikki Iliadis there about the gaps and the weaknesses that remain. So the things that we're going to have to work on. Deborah, I hope we can also bring your perspective then in like the coming session. But thank you very much for this first session for warm up. Like we are understanding a bit better what is going on AI. Nikki, please go ahead. The floor is yours.